So David Yeany is our next speaker. He's an avian ecologist for the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. David has 17 years of experience in avian ecology and conservation, and his current work includes avian ecology and monitoring, habitat-wildlife relationship studies, and working specifically on rare and endangered species. So he's going to talk to us about his work with evening grosbeaks. David, you want to take it over?
Yeah, it's telling me I'm not able to share my screen. Host disabled participant sharing.
Oh, here you go.
Okay, so we're good now? Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, Brant. I am glad to be part of this session today to share some information with you about our pilot species project on evening grosbeak, and I'm really excited to learn from all of you during the breakout portion of today's session as well. Before I begin, I want to recognize the other core members of our project team, Matthew Young from the Finch Research Network and Luke DeGroat from Powder Mill Avian Research Center. As I know others will agree, these projects are only possible through collaborations, and this project itself is actually an outgrowth of collaborative research we began with evening grosbeaks in Pennsylvania 6 years ago. I also want to acknowledge and thank all the organizations that have provided funding and support to this project thus far. All of our work to date and this current opportunity to conserve the evening grosbeak through the Road to Recovery initiative would not be possible without your support. So thank you. So how does evening grosbeak fit into the Road to Recovery process? In 2016, Partners in Flight highlighted a 92% range-wide population decline since 1970. And they noted this as the steepest decline among land birds in the United States and Canada. It was added to the Partners in Flight Yellow Watch list and concurrently listed as a special concern species in Canada. Then in 2018, the IUCN updated the evening grosbeak red list status to vulnerable. Based on the trends cited in these other listings, Road to Recovery listed evening grosbeak among its 90+ species on the brink of endangerment in 2020. Evening grosbeak is in the high urgency group for those species with large population loss and continued or accelerated decline. So when you look at the R2R 4-stage process, our project is in phase 1. And this is where we're assessing and learning both through the species biology and through social science. So currently we are assessing what we know about the possible threats driving this huge decline in evening grosbeaks. For one, we do know there's a link between evening grosbeak populations and spruce budworm population cycles. We also know that habitat changes and mature forest loss may be a factor. Evening grosbeaks suffer from collisions, mortalities from collisions with both windows and vehicles. Disease may be a factor, and then also the unknown effects of climate change on its spruce fir forest breeding habitats. We're also in the beginning stages of identifying partners in evening grosbeak conservation. We're evaluating who diverse partners are, from local groups to national agencies, and their locations throughout the evening grosbeak continental range. We have the task of beginning to address evening grosbeak knowledge gaps, both in species biology and social science. And what this means is that we're identifying what biological information is needed to develop the conservation plans that will help put evening grosbeak on the road to recovery. This includes things like linking populations, determining migratory connectivity, and hopefully pinpointing which of these threats and limiting factors are most pressing. At the same time, we're looking to include partner needs and objectives into as many aspects of the process as we can. For our project, in the current timeline through 2023, we have specific objectives that match up with phase 1 of the R2R process. Evening grosbeak has 5 subpopulations or call types that breed across Canada, the northern and western United States, and Mexico. Most call type populations have an eruptive migration strategy, where they leave breeding areas in large numbers in search of more abundant winter food sources. In Pennsylvania, we've been studying evening grosbeak winter and migration movements since 2017 through color banding and resighting and radio tagging and tracking via the Modus Wildlife Tracking System. Now, as an R2R pilot project, we aim to deploy new low-tech sunbird satellite tags across 3 major regions of the species' US winter range over the next 2 years, with our first deployments beginning this past winter in Maine and Minnesota. We plan to bring together new data collected across the range with data from our Pennsylvania birds to begin linking populations and evaluating migratory connectivity. We have the future goal of reaching multiple call type populations and other major regional populations, including the Western United States, Canada, and possibly Mexico. Our tagging efforts across the evening grosbeak range will allow us to map local and landscape scale use of habitats. Here you can see some maps of our early satellite tracking data from birds tagged this winter in Minnesota and Maine. Here you see some landscape movements as birds move from wintering areas in Minnesota to breeding areas in Canada. And then in the inset map, local movements on breeding grounds in Quebec from a bird that was tagged in Maine. Using these data, we aim to link populations across the grosbeak's annual cycle. Finally, as an important component of phase 1, we are establishing an international evening grosbeak working group. Even though it's in its infancy, we've already engaged more than 40 partners through our first several meetings, but we still will be seeking to strategically add partners from across the evening grosbeak's expansive range and from diverse backgrounds, including local communities, natural resource industries, citizen scientists, native peoples, and then, of course, other conservation groups. To wrap up, I'll leave you with some thoughts on how we envision the road to recovery process helping advance evening grosbeak conservation. The process directs us toward the intentional inclusion of diverse partners from the beginning, rather than somewhere down the road. This sets the stage for holistic conservation, meeting the needs of multiple interest groups while working toward recovery of the species. Through this process, we look to engage with partners toward conservation actions at key science-based locations. For example, in this map, you see spruce budworm outbreak zones where we were able to link populations, evening grosbeaks from our Pennsylvania wintering populations, or places where grosbeaks may be an important part of the local economy, like Sax-Zim Bog. Now, one hypothetical example of this would be to involve forestry agencies and communities early on in the process. This would include discussions about the science-based needs for evening grosbeaks, such as their relationship with spruce budworms and the forest habitat they need, as well as the forestry and local community needs. Ideally, the outcome would be a co-production of strategies for management of forests and spruce budworm that will also benefit evening grosbeak in key locations throughout its range. With that, thank you.